Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to my PhD defense. I am very pleased to see you all. My name is Naif Alghamdi, and I'm going to present to you briefly my research and what I have been doing in the last 4 years and a half. The program of today, we will present for 15 minutes, and then we'll have a break. And the defense itself will start at exactly 10. My research is about university campuses in Saudi Arabia, and the context of the presentation, or the outline of the presentation, I will first start with the context, which is the problems that we have in Saudi Arabia about sustainability in university campuses, and then I will show you the aims research question and the approach in which I conducted the research, and then I will show you the main lessons learned from best practices. Then we'll move to the conclusions and recommendations. First of all, let me give you a brief background about the country. Saudi Arabia is a country in the Middle East with the size of half of Europe. So it's a big country. The population is 33 millions, which is double of that of Netherlands. The climate is desert climate, and the economy is based on exporting petroleum. The higher education system in Saudi Arabia has a plan, and this plan is a strategic plan called the Horizon. It's 2030. It is based on three dimensions: quality, diversity, and expansion. And in my research, I'm focusing on expansion side, which is basically expansion in terms of the number of students and expansion in the number of universities, and in the percentage or the number of students being admitted to the universities. In order to achieve this vision, the country or the government is investing massively in higher education institutions, or the system in general. So they are, in the last 5 years, they spent almost a quarter of the national budget on education and training, so we now have, or we used to have 8 public universities. Now, however, we have 28 public universities. Yet, there are branches of these new universities. Now, the 20 new universities mean that 70% of higher education facilities in Saudi Arabia are still under construction at the moment. We have in the system 1.4 million students in public universities, and we expect the capacity to increase to up to 2 million students once we have all this infrastructure finished. The average size of campus is 6 million, which is a large size campus, so that's almost 3 TU Delft. And they expect the inhabitants, those who live in the campus, to be around 90,000 inhabitants per campus. So that's almost creating a new city like Delft. What I would like to show you here is the current status of university campuses. Some of the campuses are already completed and in use. Others are still under construction, or they were built in phases. So all these issues have to be taken into consideration in order to achieve sustainable campus. With that, the aim of my research is to improve sustainability aspects in university campuses. The research question, or the main research question, is what information, tools, and approaches will allow existing and new university campuses to become more sustainable. In order to answer this question, there are three stages in order to conduct the research. I started with exploring the situation in Saudi Arabia, and then the second stage, explanation, which I have tried to explain through the best practices cases, the issues in Saudi Arabia and how can we improve it. So we propose planning guidelines, and then the last phase is the conclusion, where I draw the main lessons and also propose the approach for universities to become more sustainable. Some of the issues in Saudi Arabia, briefly, most of the universities in Saudi Arabia, they have sustainability vision for their campuses, but unfortunately, they lack defined policies in order to achieve this vision. Another issue is planning for sustainability. We see all these huge investment and buildings and all that, but then if you look, because they built this because thinking that, okay, we have an increase in the youth population in the country. As you can see here, we are somewhere here, 2018, and there will be a sharp increase in the youth population up to the year 2000. Now, my question is, what are we going to do in case of the declining scenario of youth population? That's the key question that I addressed in the research. The other issue also, commitment to sustainability. A lot of universities in the country didn't really make it to the, only two public universities made it to the international ranking of green campuses. The knowledge and awareness of sustainability, students in general have little knowledge about the concept of sustainable development, which is a serious issue that we need to raise awareness of such important concept. The other issue also is the university campus. They have located these new campuses far away from their cities, and that is a problematic. Just an example, quick example, Al-Jof University. Al-Jof University is located, the main campus, located between two big cities, Skaka and Domat al-Jandal. 30 kilometers from the city center, 25 kilometers from the, so everyone has to commute to the campus unless they construct housing units for staff and students. The other issue, of course, with having faraway locations, you have to provide infrastructure projects. For example, the electricity, you need these substation and the water and sewage systems, and et cetera, et cetera. The other issue also, physical accessibility. If you compare the old universities with new universities, we see the average of new universities around 30 or on average 30 kilometers commuting distance. Other issues that I will just mention, well, it's for the physical accessibility, it's not always doom and gloom. Huh? We have some sustainable initiatives. This is electric bus in one of the universities in Saudi Arabia, surfing. This is at King Saud University for Health Sciences. campus in a campus that serves 10,000 students. Another good example is metro trains in Princess Nora University, serving over 40,000 female students, because this university is only for female. Other issues: climate considerations, flexibility, and space utilization. So if we were to categorize these problems, we see a management aspect or management problem or issues, engagement, and environment. Now, the best the lessons learned from best practices are as follows. First one, implementing a holistic sustainability framework using both top-down approach and bottom-up approach. You see, if we investigate the issues of sustainability in well-known public universities in the West or in Europe, we see they have this comprehensive approach to sustainability, addressing almost every aspect of sustainability, both from the top, from rectorate and from top management at the university, and also from the bottom, you see initiatives from students and staff. The other issue is leading by example. So, and they use their campus as a living lab, which means not only they do teach and do research on sustainability in their classrooms or labs, they also use their own campus as a lab, as an open lab for applying their ideas and research. The other issue is looking at sustainability comprehensively, addressing aspects of management, academia, environment, engagement, and innovation. Conclusion. The main conclusion of my research is that when we want to assess sustainability in university campuses, then we need to address 5 aspects. The first one is environment. Second one is management. Third one is engagement. Fourth one is innovation and academia. And of course, in order to measure all these aspects, you need indicators, those performance indicators. For example, energy, water, waste for the environment. For the engagement, you have all these indicators, and so on and so forth. The other conclusion and recommendations for the study is that I proposed 6-step approach for universities to become more sustainable. First step is commitment, and what I mean by commitment is showing leadership in institutionalizing sustainability in the whole aspects of the university. Signing declarations, for example, sustainability declarations, showing you are committed to sustainability. The other thing is also engaging all these stakeholders. The next step is to evaluate, and what I mean by evaluate is to assess what sustainability policies, plans, initiatives, programs that you already have in your institution. You could also have a baseline matrix so that you can use it to compare with your progress that you are making or you will be making in the future. The next step is to plan, and what I mean by plan is to plan systematically. So you are thinking about almost all aspects of sustainability, from academia to management to engagement, raising awareness, to environment and innovation. You need also to have targets that you need to meet. And the next step is implementation. Of course, once you plan, you implement all these initiatives or all these plans, and you try to have targets that are short-term and medium-term. The fifth step is to track. What I mean by track is to measure and assess your progress in addressing sustainability. That is to have, say, tools that you can measure or assess your progress. The last step is review. What I mean by review is to redesign, replan, reorient towards more sustainable solutions. And you can, I see some universities involving third party to help them assess all their progress. And then you have also to, at the end, you have to celebrate your achievement so that you encourage people to also continue working on sustainability. The next slide shows the overall strategies and actions and the steps here that we have just discussed. And this is some of the strategies and also the actors who is responsible to implement all these strategies and the time frame where these strategies have to be implemented. As a final remark, I believe in the saying that where there is a will, there is a way. In Saudi Arabia, with the current leadership we have at the moment, I think we can achieve much more, and our country and also the universities can achieve a sustainable university. Thank you very much for your listening. Thank you.
Ik open de zitting van de commissie ter beoordeling van het proefschrift en de stellingen van Naif Alghamdi, Master of Science in Advanced Architectural Studies. De verdediging zal in het Engels worden gevoerd. I request the promovendus to go to the lectern. A warm welcome for all of you at the public defense by the candidate of the dissertation entitled University Campuses in Saudi Arabia, Sustainability Challenges and Potential Solutions. The Board for Doctorates of the TU Delft has installed a committee to evaluate the dissertation and the propositions, and the committee will have a debate with the candidates in public. It's an honor to present the members for this committee, to whom I extend a hearty welcome. At the order table to the right, I welcome Professor Sinclair from the University of Calgary, Canada. Thank you for flying from Canada to the Netherlands and your presence here in the public defense. Next to Professor Sinclair, I welcome Professor Lozano from the University of Gävle, Sweden. Next to Professor Lozano, Professor De Wulf welcome to you as well from the University of Twente, the Netherlands. And to the left, Dr. Roorda from Roorda Sustainability. Welcome, Dr. Roorda. On this side of the room, I welcome Professor van der Dobbelsteen, Faculty of Architecture and the Built Environment, Delft University of Technology. Next to me, to my left, Professor Den Heijer from the same faculty, Faculty of Architecture and the Built Environment, promoter. And to my right, the other promoter, Professor De Jonge, also from the Faculty of Architecture and the Built Environment, Delft University of Technology. Thank you all for taking part in this ceremony. My name is Hans Wamelink, and it's my pleasure to chair this session on behalf of the Rector Magnificus. I would now like to start your position, and I'd like to give the word to Professor Sinclair.
Waarde promovendus, let me first thank you for preparing a comprehensive and timely dissertation, critically considering the state of and the potential future of sustainability within university campuses in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Having myself spent considerable time in the Gulf region, I understand the challenges faced in executing this research, but also grasp the great need for and the real significance of the work you have before us. Meneer Director, I would ask the candidate to read Proposition 7.
Waarde promovendus, may I request you to read aloud Proposition number 7.
Meneer Director, the Rechter, Proposition number 7 is strategy is not always the hardest part, implementation is.
Thank you very much. Professor Sinclair, you may continue the opposition.
In your dissertation, you delineate 6 steps of implementation: commit, evaluate, plan, implement, track, and then review. Now, despite the importance of sustainability in university campuses, very little attention has been given to such a topic in Saudi Arabia. I'm wondering if you could explain to me why that's the case. Is it behaviorally driven? Is it culturally driven? Is it about a sense of entitlement? Is it a sense of apathy or something else? What is driving this inattention to sustainability?
Waarde promovendus, is this question clear to you?
Yes, meneer de Rechter.
Then I give you the opportunity to defend yourself.
Thank you very much for your question, Professor Sinclair. If I understand your question correctly, you are asking about what is it that driven the not giving attention to sustainability in Saudi Arabia or in university campuses in Saudi Arabia?
Yes, correct.
There are many factors, I think, that played a key role in this issue. First of all is awareness of the fact that sustainability would bring about many solutions that we in Saudi Arabia need. For example, the country is a desert country. We have a harsh climate, and we have many other challenges. So awareness of what can sustainability bring to our campuses, that's number one. Number two is the expertise. I can see that from the interviews I have done with the decision makers and policy makers too, not little is known, I would say, about the latest developments in sustainability in university campuses. So knowledge and awareness is number one, expertise number two. Number three is the idea or the perception that, okay, for example, if we go with the green building principles and applying that, the cost involved in that is an issue that many policy and decision makers think that, when you immediately introduce the idea of sustainability and green buildings, then immediately they say, it's expensive, extra cost. Now, the issue with that is you try to explain that, okay, if you think that it will bring upfront cost to the project, for example, you do not really think about the second phase, or the if you think about the life cycle of the building. You start by planning and construction, but then the longest phase, which is operation and maintenance. There you spend 65% of the cost, according to the literature, 65% of the cost of life building analysis cost, they say it is spent on the operation and maintenance. And there, where you have to raise awareness and inform those decision makers and policy makers that, guys, here where we should focus on, because this will save us quite a lot in the long run. Because you are always thinking about the initial phase, which is the planning and construction, and forgetting about the real deal.
So, a simple question with a short answer. Who is the primary user of your guidelines?
I would say policy makers, decision makers at the university level, and also in the ministry. But again, I cannot limit the dissertation to that, because in my dissertation also, I try to convey the message to also planners at the university levels, and also to the faculty members, staff, employees, students, trying to engage everyone in this very important topic.
Okay. In the wordings in your guidelines, I would argue they're quite soft. You use words like advise, recommend. And I'm wondering why you didn't more aggressively tackle the problem using words like required, shall, must. And I guess related to that question is, should you, with these guidelines, be looking at a carrot or a cane in terms of implementation? In other words, do you incentivize the uptake of your guidelines, or do you enforce them in a maybe more rigid regulatory kind of way?
I think we have been thinking about this, for quite a lot of time, but we settled with the supervisory team that, and also it's in our culture that you talk to me like as advice or something like that, but not as an order. So first, to be honest, it was, I said required, must, should. But then we thought about it and thought about the context and everything, and we say, okay, let's just soften the language, if you like, in order to get them engaged and accept the idea.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. So I'd like to move on to the second question. Minher Director, could you have the candidate read Proposition 4?
Thank you, Professor Sinclair. Waarde promovendus, may I request you to read aloud proposition number 4?
Proposition number 4 is, if higher education doesn't lead the sustainability effort in society, who will?
Thank you.
So in your dissertation, you talk about lack of support, noticeable absence of true leadership, and I would argue that the current culture in Saudi is perhaps focused on overly materialistic issues. Bigger is better, faster is better, newer is better, more is more. So in some ways, one could argue modern Saudi has forgotten many of the lessons of the past in terms of how to react to the conditions, the climate, the topography. So I'm wondering, who do you envision assuming leadership to move this agenda that you've delineated forward?
Thanks for the question. I think given the history and the culture and the way people behave, the best approach, in my opinion, is a top-down approach. I'm very happy with the current leadership we have in the country, with the Crown Prince leading many sustainability initiatives, and that I think also universities, top management, rectorate office, and they also have to play their role as leading by example. For example, talking the talk and also walk the walk. Practice what you preach. This is, I think, the best way to approach sustainability and push for aggressive change and really quick, because with the current economy and many other issues in the country, the need for sustainability is even greater at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I have, I think, a very short amount of time left. So I would, Meneer Director, could you have the candidate read proposition number 8?
Waarde promovendus, may I request you to read aloud proposition number 8?
Thank you, meneer de rechter. Proposition number 8 is: you learn much more from life than from books.
So these are great words of wisdom.
I hope so.
And if true, then what is the worth of your PhD?
Thanks for your question, Professor Sinclair. This proposition is a general proposition about life, and it's not really necessary about physical books or having spent so much time with my own colleagues. I can appoint to Samson Aziaba from Ghana. That's my office mate and my neighbor. I have learned so much from him. So, you can learn so much in your life, not just from books, but also from the life and the people and the environment. And this is what is meant in this proposition. Okay. And I hope my PhD is worth reading and worth...
So you still like the PhD?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Professor Sinclair, are you satisfied with the answers to your questions?
I am satisfied, thank you.
Thank you. Then I thank you for the opposition, and I want to continue with the opposition by Professor Lozano.
Dank u wel, meneer director. Waarde promovendus, thank you very much for inviting me today for your PhD opposition. You made me suffer a little bit with your PhD. All right. In a way, it's, as I mentioned in my comments, it's a very nicely put together PhD. I'm not used to having so many colors in PhDs I read, so it's a very colorful, very nicely presented PhD with a lot of information. It's very different from other PhDs that I've read, mainly because you start from the case of Saudi Arabia, then you move to your literature review. Most of the other PhDs that I've read, they usually start with a literature review and then they move into the cases. So starting from that, I would like you to explain the rationale on why Saudi Arabia. I mean, I understand the rationale because you come from there, but when you write it in a book, taking it from Professor Sinclair's last comment, the book may end up in somebody's desk in Tanzania, Tasmania, maybe even in Mars. So the book has to really express what it is, and you have to really communicate all the things that are there. So I would like you to give me that rationale on why Saudi Arabia.
Hoogleraar opponent, Professor Sinclair, Professor Lozano, thank you so much for your question. The idea in starting with the cases of Saudi Arabia is, I would love to, of course, I have done literature before conducting the cases. In that literature, I developed or I have reviewed assessment tools, and I have developed also the analytical tool to be used when looking at the Saudi cases. So there is literature that is literature review that has been done before conducting the real cases. I started the Saudi cases to understand what are the issues that we have to address and address urgently. I've looked at 8 cases that I selected based on selection criteria. And in these cases, I have learned so much about the main issues that we need to address in Saudi Arabia. Then the next phase of the research is to, okay, we know now the issues in Saudi Arabia. Having looked at the literature, we then need to move and search for best practices in terms of policies and also operations. There I studied international cases that are known for being sustainable. So that is the process that I used in order to reach my conclusion at the end of the book.
Let me interrupt you. So if I'm reading your book and I'm from Sweden, from Russia, what can I learn from your book in the case of Russia? So that's what my question is aimed at. Is okay, you have Saudi Arabia, you've chosen Saudi Arabia because you're from there, you have access, you know the system, but how can you take those examples out of Saudi Arabia to other countries?
Okay.
Because if you can only apply them for one part of even a city or only one region, within science is not really that good. You need to be able to at least transfer some of those experiences to other parts of the world, as you transfer them from the US back to Saudi Arabia. So my question is, why did you choose Saudi Arabia? What is so unique about the Saudi Arabian case that other places in the world can learn from that?
Okay. First of all, I said the Saudi cases because it's the focus of the research. This is, if you like, the aim, is to improve sustainability aspects in the Saudi cases. So, of course, you need to study the Saudi cases and you need to study cases to learn from. Now, in your question, I sense that you would love to know why you studied Saudi Arabia and you invested so much time and effort there. And not say, how can you apply the lessons to other countries. In chapter 6 and 7, I proposed the planning guidelines where many lessons can be applied in wherever it's possible, considering the climates, the mode of transportation, etc., etc. So that is number one. The other issue also that can be also learned from is the proposed 6-step approach. That can be, I think, applicable in any situation. So you know the steps and you can follow it, whether you are from Russia, Sweden, Germany, Brazil, or wherever. So,
thank you for your answer. You mentioned sustainability in the title of your book. Can you tell me what do you understand for sustainability?
Well, sustainability is huge containers of all these ideas and aspects, and so I need to be precise about what I am going to study. So looking at sustainability, I can't study everything in sustainability. Let's be clear about that. So I just selected the most important aspects of sustainability for my own country. So I looked at issues of sustainability from the management side, from the engagement side, from the environment side. So sustainability in university campuses, or if I were to define a sustainable university, I would say it's a university that is considering practices, sustainable practices, environmentally, economically, socially, and also educationally, because we are talking about universities, through its university campus life cycle. So it's planning and also operation, construction, maintenance, and then retrofitting, through all management directions, top-down, bottom-up approaches, in many shapes and forms. For example, energy saving, water conservation, well-being, health, and in many ways, for example, flexibility, optimal use of space, multifunctionality, all these ideas that represent how can you be more sustainable.
In your thesis, you focus mainly on environmental issues. So my question would be, why not just indicate in your title environmental sustainability rather than trying to cover the whole thing? Because we all know that sustainability, including economic, environmental, and social, is really large, whereas your focus is mainly on environmental sustainability. So I think it might have been a better idea to just say environmental sustainability or environmental management on your title, and then you could have easily reduced the scope to that one.
Yeah. If you look at chapter 6, I also try to suggest or propose or recommend how can we raise awareness. And in that, I talked about the academia and the education side of that, even though it's not my main focus. But again, the aim is to comprehensively improve the sustainability in university campuses. And in order to do that, you need to address all the aspects of sustainability, among which is academia, for example, engagement, for example, social aspect. All these are issues that you would love your product or your book for people to appreciate what is in it and how can we look at sustainability holistically or comprehensively.
My final question, which I think it types out all mine, what is your main contribution to the field of higher education for sustainable development?
The main contribution is that I have tried to simplify and operationalize the sustainability tools that are used to assess sustainability in university campuses. There are already many existing tools. So my contribution, one of my contributions, was to look at the existing tools and try to simplify their structures, try to highlight the indicators or the performance indicators that universities will use to assess and then advance their sustainability aspects. So that's one of the contributions. The other contribution is it's also to address, to assess, and also to assess and then address sustainability in campuses in Saudi Arabia, because little attention has been given to that. You see some publications, but they haven't looked at the overall picture of sustainability. So then they recommended many in many research, they recommended having a comprehensive study of sustainability in the country.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Professor Lozano, do you think that your questions are adequately answered?
Yes, thank you very much.
Then I'd like to thank you for the opposition and want to give the floor to Professor De Wulf to continue the opposition.
Dank u wel, meneer de rector. Waarde promovendus. I would like to congratulate you with this very comprehensive work, the very in-depth cases. You said you learned a lot from life. I learned a lot from your thesis, so I would like to thank you for that. I would like to follow up a little bit the discussion that you had with Professor Sinclair. You mentioned in your dissertation that knowledge awareness and awareness, knowledge and awareness is very important key principles. I wanted to challenge you by the conclusion that actually what you propose is a very top-down approach, but you already said that you're a proponent of a top-down and enforcing guidelines. So at one hand you said, okay, leadership, clear strategy, top-down approach is important. On the other hand, you emphasize the awareness and engagement. And I would like to challenge you a little bit with that, because although you did a very comprehensive study, you conducted a lot of interviews, you talked to a lot of people, I was a little bit amazed that in the end you did not find so many tensions between different levels in the organization or tensions about people. It's like there's one key truth about sustainability. There's only one sustainability. If you look at sense-making, if you look at adoption theory, etc., they talk a lot about tensions and how you cope with different interpretations. They call that frames of interpretations between different stakeholders. I didn't see so much about that, although you referred to one of the schemes of Professor De Jonge. Actually, I used to work also on that scheme about the real estate and different levels and the tensions. I didn't see so much about in your data. Before I continue with my questions, is that a correct observation of mine, or why did you not find tensions?
Hooggeleraar opponent, Professor De Wulf, thank you for your question. As you said, I have done around 40 interviews, especially interviews from the cases in the US. They have raised that issue, which is people are not really at the same level as you in the commitment to the concept of sustainability. And they have also raised the issue of the fact that you have to consider that not every department in the university will work as you wish. Sometimes they will frustrate you because of so many reasons, for example, understaffed or the capacity for them or the skills or the knowledge they don't have. So there is always this tension of not everyone being at the same page, if you like. I have mentioned something about that in the analysis of the interviews. Is that?
Yeah, okay. But still, you don't do much about that?
Yes.
Is that a culture thing in Saudi Arabia, or is it, I mean, there's only one story there. Can I conclude that?
Well, I wouldn't.
Let me say something.
I wouldn't say so, but.
Okay, let me ask you a little bit similar question.
Okay.
If you would take all these people here, all these experts on sustainability, and I'm not the one, but take the other people here and put them all in one big room, and you would have a discussion about sustainability. I can guarantee you that they will all have the kind of same drive, but they will disagree about the indicators, about the metrics to be used, and certainly about the action that you have to take. Also, information about sustainability is always politically influenced. There's not one truth. I'm almost looking like, I mean, there's a guy in the US saying that. But I think you will have a disagreement. So if I look at your framework, and I look at page 79, and then further on in your conclusions, you say, okay, there's a kind of loop, and of course you have to evaluate it all the time. But there are different types of loops, there are different types of information, there's a disagreement about what's a good indicator or not. Although you use a framework with one indicator, or kind of one metrics. So I would like to challenge you, is there only one indicator? Is there only one truth? Or how do you, to further develop sustainability, cope with these kind of different interpretations? Although all these people are well educated, they all have the bright brains, but they have a different interpretation.
Thank you for your question. Of course, you know, everyone has entitled to his own opinion and his own judgment about the way to work and the way to approach, for example, sustainability in university campuses. In Saudi Arabia, I would say that people are open for criticism, but in a polite way.
Not like in the Netherlands, you mean?
Well,
Okay.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Okay. I'm saying that.
So yes, people will make their opinion clear, and in sustainability and with all these aspects, with all these indicators, of course there are priorities. So at the end of the day, you are the one who decide to select what is the best and how can you approach it, and with what capabilities and to what extent. Yes, if you are dealing with many organizations or many departments within universities, then you expect there will be some agencies that will not be at the same page as you, and as you wish them to be. So we take this into consideration. It was a point mentioned in one of the recommendations that raised by those people or experts interviewed in the US, and I have highlighted that point.
Okay, I can live with that. A little bit similar question, but more about the future. So you started with indicators, and you looked at the different cases, and you looked at how these campuses were developed and what kind of decision they have made, etc. Again, like I said, it's very comprehensive work, and I see certainly the value of it. But you looked very much at greenfield developments, so new developments, etc. Politics are changing also in Saudi Arabia. Also, the environmental policy is changing. So what's now a good starting point might be totally different in 5 to 10 years. I mean, if you look at the Netherlands, we had a discussion about gas. Gas was good 10 years ago. Now suddenly everybody has to implement water pumps. So things are changing. The ideas are changing. How do you... So, and you raised the point about flexibility, but you looked at flexibility in building terms and in furniture terms, not in flexibility of strategy, for instance. How do you cope with this kind of uncertain developments in the future? And what does that mean for your framework and for your advice you give to the campus development?
Thanks for the question. This is not... we can say that, yes, what I have proposed now might be good for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but maybe not for the next 10 years. So there is always this continuous improvement that has to be done. With regards to your question, I did not really think of what is going to happen with these strategies in the future. Or this is, I would say, out of the scope of my study, because the research is to just focus on how can we improve existing and new campuses that will be built in the next phase. We have addressed some issues with flexibility. We know that with time there are changes that will happen. So we need to accommodate all these changes with the built environment. But with policy, I think one of the steps is review, and in that step, I also recommended that we look at the policies and we see if we can reorient towards more sustainable outcome. So you could say that strategy is one of the things that will be looked at the final stages with whether we achieved our goal or not. So there we can say it's the last step of the sixth approach, the review we can use to also evaluate whether we achieved our goal or not, and then we can re-plan or re-adjust.
Professor De Wulf, are you satisfied with the answers to your question?
Thank you.
I thank you for the opposition. I'd like to invite Dr. Roorda to continue the opposition.
Dank u, meneer de rector. Waarde promovendus, I would like to ask you a few questions about the assessment tools, as they are very fundamental to your work. You used your own assessment tool in order to perform your research, and in order to develop that, you started with a list of 12 existing assessment tools. And of course, you will probably be aware that there are more than 12 assessment tools around in the world, but you used specifically these 12 because, as you say, well, one of the demands at least is they are still widely used. So I will start with a simple question, and the question is this, that then if you want to use only assessment tools that are still in use, then why did you use the Sustainability Assessment Questionnaire designed by the ULSF in 2001, which, to my knowledge, has not been used for at least 10 years? That's one. And on the other hand, why did you not use a system called Learning in Future Environments, or for short LIFE, developed by the EAUC in the United Kingdom, which is one of the big assessment tools nowadays, at least for about 10 years. And also, it might have been clever to use another tool called Staunch, as it was developed by my esteemed fellow committee member, Professor Lozano.
Clear, opponent, thank you for your question. At the beginning of your question, you said your own tool. I would say it is my own tool, but it was based on reviewing 12 assessment tools. Those assessment tools, or the 12 assessment tools that I reviewed, I selected based on certain criteria. Now, you have mentioned 2 or 3 examples of not being included in the research was done in 2014. This part of the research was done in 2014. That's number one. Number 2 is we have a selection criteria, and in one of these criteria, I have indicated clearly that the assessment tool should be covering most aspects of sustainability in university campuses. One of the tools you mentioned is just focusing on the education side of sustainability in university campuses, and not as comprehensive as the others. So they don't cover, for example, the environmental aspect.
Is this true for LIFE, you mean?
No, the other one.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, not including 1 or 2 of these tools does not mean that they are less important, or but they maybe they did not meet my criteria.
Okay, thank you. Now let's go to the next question, which is more important, I think, because if you start with 12 assessment tools, and then you want to derive in a certain way your own assessment tools from them, as you just said, you wanted to simplify and operationalize the assessment. then I would expect something like, I looked at assessment tool number 1, and there you had these and these characteristics, and assessment tool 2 had these and these characteristics. You do that, but next I would expect you to make a comparison and draw a conclusion explicitly, and visibly derive your assessment tool from those 12. And I was reading your thesis, of course, I was studying it, and I was waiting, when will this happen? And, well, it didn't happen, and then I found that you made a reference to a publication of yours in 2017, so I took that as well, wondering why, if there are the answers, you didn't put them in the thesis, but okay. Well, I didn't find that either in that publication. So now I wonder, how did you find a way to go from those 12 to your assessment tools? I didn't read it.
Okay. Thanks for the question. If you look at the appendixes in the thesis, you will see Appendix A. You will see all the 12 assessment tools. Now, in Chapter 2, under the subtitle Sustainability Tools, I have this table that I used comparison the pros and cons of these tools that I just cited from other references, and I updated also that comparison. So the comparison is there in Chapter 2. The details of all the tools, the 12 tools are in the appendixes. And what's your last question? Sorry.
Yes, it is true that the details of the 12 are in Appendix A. Yes, but how did you combine that to come to your assessment tool?
Well, I've looked at all the criteria, sub-criteria, and also the indicators of all these tools, and I have selected those criteria or those tools, or those indicators that are of interest to the research, that are very important to address the research problems. And also indicators that if we in Saudi Arabia do not address now, then the consequence would be terrible.
Mm-hmm. I see. You mentioned, you might call them the big 5 criteria: management, academia, engagement, environment, and innovation. And then at a certain point, you state that one of the most important are 3 of those. I think from a language point, that should have been 3 of the most important. But then actually, I wonder what you are saying. If you say those 3 are 3 of the most important, and there are only 5 in total, then you don't make clear to me why you select those 3 to further investigate them. So I wonder, how exactly did you come to selecting those 3?
Waarde promovendus, given the time left, I request you to give a short answer.
Okay. There are, in the book, there are 5 or 4 selection criteria for selecting the 3. Why did I select the 3 aspects and the 10 indicators? In there, I indicated that the main drive was the research problems and the consequence of not addressing these particular aspects and these particular indicators. It's because of the research problems and the consequence of not addressing these problems.
Dr. Roda, I think this gives further inspiration for further discussion. But for now, I would like to thank you for the opposition. And I want to give the floor to Professor van der Doppelsteen.
Thank you, meneer de rector. Waarde promovendus, thank you very much for a very interesting thesis, which for us, coming from a totally different country, is interesting to read and very important, because the concept that says sustainability should be disseminated everywhere, and especially in the difficult countries where you have a difficult climate. Meneer de rector, I want to ask a question starting with proposition number 3, please.
Waarde promovendus, may I request you to read aloud proposition number 3?
Thank you, meneer director. Proposition number 3 is the location of a university campus is more important for sustainability than how it is built.
Yes, waarde promovendus. I can imagine what is the reasoning behind it. And maybe for the audience who do not have your thesis, it's good to show, for instance, the picture on page 125, just to sort of clarify the connection of the proposition to a picture from practice. Yeah, this one. Because what we see here in the picture is, of course, a vast parking lot in an empty area. There's no shading. There's, well, it's not completely filled with cars, but you can see that they have accounted for many. So looking at these Saudi Arabian universities, that they are mostly quite far away from living areas. So I can imagine that transportation is an important factor. Nonetheless, I think that the design of buildings, especially when you show the good examples, and therefore you can show the picture on page 37. Page 37 basically shows 3 pictures of universities that you also consider as being among the exemplars of sustainable design. Here you see that. So one is in Saudi Arabia, and the other 2 are in the Emirates and in Qatar.
Yes.
But these are pictures actually demonstrating good building design. My question would be, do you have quantitative evidence that indeed the location is more significant than the building design? For instance, in terms of CO2 emissions or energy performance?
Here, Khilair opponent, thank you for your question. I do not have evidence supporting that in terms of data, but the base for saying such thing is imagine that you are building the most sustainable or one of the most sustainable building somewhere in the desert. The distance would be a critical thing because especially in my case where they have been building all these campuses far away from their cities, and then if you look at the projections of youth population, okay, we have an increase up to the year 2035, but then we have a sharp decrease. And I'm sure that decision makers and policy makers back home are thinking of, having all these facilities ready by then. But the real question is, what are we going to do with it in case of declining scenarios based on the United Nations projections? Mm-hmm. So this is very important because, okay, we have sustainable building somewhere in the desert, but it's far away. We have declining scenario here. So that is the main issue and the main concern.
Okay. So I understand the reasoning behind it, but you don't have the actual real evidence in figures. Which makes it interesting to go to proposition number 6, meneer de rector.
Waarde promovendus, may I request you to read aloud proposition number 6?
Okay, number 6 is the most sustainable building is the one that is never built.
For designers like me, that's a sort of pessimistic statement. The most sustainable life is the one that never started. And I do not agree with that statement, especially not in desert climates like in Saudi Arabia. And the reason is that I think that building, and that's why I make the connection to proposition number 3, which is about the location outside the city or outside the city, far away from living areas compared to in the middle of a city. Because I think building, well, there's no middle in the desert, but building in the middle of a desert, far away from a city, might actually be an incentive, a possibility to improve local conditions in that desert. especially when you look, for instance, at climate adaptation. You create actually living conditions which are good for people, healthy, safe environments in areas that would otherwise not be inhabitable. That's one thing. So that's also part of sustainability, the social importance. And the second thing is, and it's even more important, I think, building can improve climate mitigation in this desert, because every watt that you can take away from solar irradiation and convert to electricity, if you use PV, for instance, will reduce the upheating of the desert. It might be insignificant if it's about one university, but nonetheless, physically that's true. And the third one, and I want to hear your reflection on that, I think also that in terms of biodiversity, ecological value, even food production perhaps, putting a building in the middle of a desert might actually create a whole new biotope with very valuable conditions for life. What is your idea about that?
Well, thanks for the question. With all due respect to your opinion, I think I would stand firm with this proposition, because even if you build, as you think, the most sustainable campus or building or whatever, there is always this supply chain process that not many people would think about that, because there are resources there not necessarily addressed or calculated. So there are resources somewhere that haven't been calculated for the emissions, for the natural resources. So I would say that I disagree with their point of view, but.
Okay, meneer de rector, I suggest that we have a further discussion after this defense. Thank you very much.
Professor van der Dobbelsteen, I thank you for the opposition. I'd like to give the floor to the promoter, Professor Den Heijer.
Waarde promovendus.
Professor Den Heijer, may I request you to wear your cap?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's my first time. I knew this was going to happen. Okay. Waarde promovendus. Of course, we've discussed your thesis thoroughly. So there's a lot left, of course, to question, but also a lot has been said already. But still, there's some propositions that have been discussed. So I'm going to ask meneer de rector to have you read proposition number 5. You now wish you had paronyms, right?
Okay. Proposition.
Waarde promovendus, may I request you to read aloud proposition number 5? Sure.
Proposition number 5 is space, like time, is money.
Yes, you spent some time, extensive time, on making space utilization studies. You made a lot of heat maps in your book. Can you say something about the percentages you found? Because you say they were poor, this poor utilization. But can you say something about the international comparison? If you look at other universities, a lot of universities are struggling with attendance of people. So that's the first question.
Hoogleraar promoter, thank you for your question. You have asked me about the rate of utilization of the examples back home in Saudi Arabia. Yes, indeed, they have a low utilization rate of 23%, which is very low. The importance of utilization is to understand the cost that involved in having all these spaces. So if we can optimize the use of spaces, then we can save some money that can be then channeled to research or education, to other important issues in the university.
Okay, may I interrupt you, also considering the time? So you propose that there could be measures could be taken to optimize that. You're in the campus research team, so one of your colleagues, promovendus Bart Valks, is currently exploring smart tools to keep track of where people are and to allocate them in a different way. do you think that could apply to the Saudi situation?
Absolutely. I know that Bart is one of the team, and I've read the conclusion that you draw with him in your first book about smart tools. And the Wi-Fi, for example, using Wi-Fi was one of the best options then. That can be also applicable in the case of Saudi Arabia, and we can learn, of course, much more from the Dutch cases.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to elaborate, but I think I would give the last person on the table an opportunity to ask a question. Yes.
Thank you, Professor De Heijer, for being so kind to give the floor to the other promoter, Professor De Jonge.
Dank u wel, meneer de rector. Waarde promovendus, you are defending your thesis here today, but I'd like to ask you, because we've been opposing and defending all the time for a period of 4 years, I would like to ask you a reflective question. We've had a lot of debates about research design and all the things you've done. You know, we had some arguments about that as well. If you now look backwards to the process you went in, and you had to evaluate your own research design, and you had to do it again, would you change anything?
Hoogleraar promoter, Professor De Jonge, thank you very much for your question. My answer is yes.
But what?
I like the proverb that says, well begun is half done. I would spend more time on designing and thinking about all the process before really going to the field and conduct the research and collect the data. I would spend more time in getting really exactly what I want. So that will save me quite a lot of time and effort. You know this by now. Of course, I will make sure that the tool that I will use to collect data is very clear, very sharp, precise. But then I will also leave a room for, other.
Thank you, Madam Beadle. I request the promovendus to take his seat again. And the committee will withdraw for further deliberation, and I adjourn this session. I reopen the session and request the promovendus to stand in front of the committee. Het College van Promoties van de Technische Universiteit Delft, vertegenwoordigd door de hier aanwezige commissie, heeft, na kennis te hebben genomen van uw proefschrift met stellingen en na uw verdediging daarvan te hebben gehoord, met inachtneming van het bepaalde in de wet op het hoger onderwijs en wetenschappelijk onderzoek besloten u de graad te verlenen van dokter. Ik verzoek de promotor door het college voor promoties als zodanig aangewezen zich wel van de hem opgedragen taak te kwijten.
Uit kracht van de bevoegdheid bij wet toegekend aan het college voor promoties verklaar ik namens dat college, hier vertegenwoordigd door de rector magnificus en de overige leden van de commissie, bij deze u, Naif Alghamdi, te bevorderen tot dokter en u alle rechten te verlenen welke aan de dokterstitel zijn verbonden. Ten bewijze hiervan overhandig ik u het diploma dat u recht geeft de titel dokter te voeren. Ondertekend door de rector magnificus en de promotoren en voorzien van het zegel van de Technische Universiteit Delft.
It's the promoter's privilege to be the first to congratulate the young doctor. Professor Den Heijer, the floor is yours.
Yes. Yes, Naif, I have the honor as a promoter, as a second promoter, to be the first one to call you Dr. Alghamdi. And actually I have to call you Dr. Naif because you always called me Dr. Alexandra. Always the first name. And Professor Hans, so Dr. Naif. It's a pleasure to stand here with you. This is it. We talked about this even yesterday. We said there's going to be a moment like this. And I searched my mailbox for the first mail that you sent me. March 2nd, 2013. I got this mail, 13. I got this mail saying, Dear Alexandra, very informal actually, considering the fact, Dear Alexandra, not Dr. Alexandra yet. I hope this email finds you well. You start every mail with that, right? This is your tagline. My name is Naif and I'm looking for supervisors. And of course, what followed was flattering words about Delft being on top of your list or in the top 10. You wanted to be here. And when we had our first Skype meeting, you held my book. So I was also flattered, you know, that you found us and that you found the work we did on university campus. But when you said to me and when you wrote to me that in the next 20 years, or the next years, 20 new campuses would come. So we get a lot of these flattering mails. But this line, and I will read it to you. Currently, Saudi Arabia, where I reside, is developing 20 new campuses for 20 recently founded universities, which means 70% of our universities are being designed and built. And then I thought this PhD candidate can have more impact than a lot of students, candidates that we've ever supervised. He can have impact. Let's hurry, because there's no time to lose. Because immediately I thought, you know, if it takes 4 years at least, and then I'm excluding all the visa procedure that you were, were waiting for you. You need to start right away. So we were intrigued, all of us, the whole group, also Professor De Jonge, by this situation. And I think that goes for the committee. We had an opportunity to have someone, an insider, to tell us, to describe the large value of your dissertation, what's happening there. We didn't know that. So that's something that's valued from your dissertation. I want to already say that now. So fascinated. Your arrival lasted 9 months. You got married in between because you had to wait for the visa. So you started January 2014 with your dissertation. Yeah, almost 4 years you spent. Really efficient. You got married waiting for your visa. Afnan, of course, was always present during our meetings, making us all of these delicious snacks during the sessions we had. But you started to work day and night. You know, actually one of the first proposals, or one of the only proposals that wasn't read, was number 10, that desert life, you know, makes you patient and ambitious. You have to be patient and ambitious to survive that. We could tell from the very start that working day and night was something it was your work modus. Of course, we said many times, take a step back, take a holiday, Naif, because even Afnan said at some point, don't they give you holidays? And we said, we're not the ones deciding that he should work day and night. He's the one who decides to work day and night. So, of course, it would have helped to take a step back sometimes and to reflect on why am I choosing, certain methods. And of course, you did implicitly, explicitly at some points, but most of the questions were about that. So that's a lesson that you learned, certainly in the past months, and we're happy that you learned from that. So that's about the process. But we will remember the meetings we had, always 2 hours, that always started with a reflection on what's happening in Saudi Arabia. You always had a news flash on, everything, and a lot happened in the past 4 years. A lot of positive changes that you were very proud of. So that was the first 10 minutes. You always reflected on the news in every 2-hour meeting that we had. The second 10 minutes was about your family, photos of your father, your whole family in Saudi Arabia. So we've seen your sons grow up. We've experienced whatever happened in each other's lives. You were always so compassionate about what happened in our lives. You never forgot anything. So you worked very hard, but you still were very open to the people around you. I was actually moved when you explicitly mentioned Samson, your best friend here, in your defense, because, like you said, you learned a lot from him. You learned a lot from books, let's be honest. You read a lot. You were very territorial. The first day you arrived, you put all your stuff, very organized, very accurately organized, on your desk. You knew it was a flexible concept, right? But you didn't care. No. You hung up all the visions of what was planned to remind you, it's urgent matter, I have to speed up, there's no time to lose. We kept questioning, these campuses are green, how are they going to sustain, And you said, no, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to take care of it. I'm going to be fast enough to make a difference. And here you are. You can make a difference now. And we're very curious about the role you're going to play now. So, of course, you have to tell us something about that later, maybe, during the reception. Because the questions that Brian Sinclair asked about, who's going to take the leadership? You're going to take a role. We're certain of that. But we're not sure which role yet. But what we're certain about is that we're really going to miss you, because you would switch on the light and switch off the light in the building. Your workplace was the best used, more than 100% occupancy. And more than 100% occupancy in terms of what's healthy for a person. So as an academic family and as maybe academic parents, we now are happy that you go back. Of course, we're sad, but we're also happy that you go back to your family, to your biological family. We'll certainly miss you. The whole structure of the minty, the minty you always drank, the Moroccan minty, will remind us of you. And certainly also the glass structure, the glass gifts you gave a lot of people in the audience with our photo on it and a personal message. We will group, and we will remember you as someone who set the bar for how hard you can work and that you can finish in 4 years. But of course also we learned from what that takes, what the sacrifices that you have to make also personally. And I really admire you for that. I'm proud of what you did. I'm proud of what's there. And I think we all are, again, very curious about your next role. And we hope maybe in a good way we read about you in the news. And we wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Den Heijer. Learned Dr. Alghamdi. You now have the right to use the title of doctor, and your doctorate means that society can rely on your judgment, that you will act transparently and communicate independently about your results and the social relevance of your work. In other words, your doctorate implies that you will uphold scientific integrity. I wish you a great deal of wisdom and prosperity with your new degree. On behalf of the Board for Doctorates of Delft University of Technology, I congratulate you and your family on earning your doctoral degree. Dr. Alghamdi, you may return to your seat. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your presence during this official academic session, and I close this session.
It's our pleasure. He's a great guy. And I can see like 2 drops of water in the same bucket.
Congratulations. Really well done.
Congratulations.
Yes, I'm going to get a picture of you and I. Congratulations. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Let me photo. Take one of you and I, and then one of you and Congratulations again.
So wonderful to find you. We have done several attempts in the last years to make each other. Which is very strange. Actually, I think it would be so nice. Very good. It's very ambitious. I think your son has done an important job. I really hope that the respect will have a large no, but this is a very hard flush. It was, yeah, we left I think 6 months before I came, so it was really people who were I'll give it back to you.
Congratulations, sir.
Congratulations. I have to do the cue card. I think I have to do
والله شوفتكم معنا جايين والله احنا جايين كنا طالعين لا لا ايوه عدت Next please, got the side. Thank you. I thought it's Naif, الدكتوراة.
Just make sure that the guys are between
Small enough?
Yeah, it's small.
Just if you make sure that she's between you two, then she will be perfect. Now what happens? But again,
Ja.